Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a participation song. I need your help. Okay, it's a song by Swami Ananda called "Yes, It's Devil Worship." And the verse that you sing along, those of you that know it, please do it the first time, then we'll all do it once again with the new people. So it goes, "What we need is light." Okay, so you sing that and then clap. Let's try that again. What we need is light. Okay, you got it. Brother, I've a faint suspicion you and I've been led astray, taught to drive the devil from us. We've invited him to stay. What we need is light, for we can't drive out the darkness. What is it? With a stick. With a stick. No, we can't drive out the devil with a stick. Some proclaim all men are sinners, can't escape the devil's might. How their interest must intrigue him, they won't let him out of sight. What we need is light, for we can't drive out the darkness. Talking sin, no, we can't drive out the devil talking sin. Some of us were taught the slogan, social evils must be slain. But can anger drive out sorrow? How can passion conquer pain? What we need is light, for we can't drive out the darkness. While we hate, no, we can't drive out the devil while we hate. Brother, have you ever wondered why the darkness lingers on? If we want to see the sunrise, let us turn and face the dawn. What we need is light, for we'll only best the darkness when we love, yes, we'll only best the devil when we love.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sunday service. We want to especially welcome those of you who are guests here for the first time or who are joining us on the internet, and also to extend our congratulations to those who took Kriya initiation for the first time last night. My name is Swami Ananda. This is Swami Bharat, and we're very happy to be here today. Well, we'll begin with a reading from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. These are weekly passages from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. This week's reading is called First Things First. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. That expression, first things first, is a piece of counsel often given to students of business techniques. It is the advice of practicality to those who aspire to worldly success. But according to the Hermetic doctrine, as above, so below, that which works best in one level of life is often the best guide to what will work best on every other level. If a person is true to his highest priorities, he will generally find that his other needs are fulfilled naturally as well. This is true certainly of the search for God. One of the greatest sayings of Jesus Christ was the simple sentence in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 6. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Paramahansa Yogananda gave his elder brother Ananda a wonderful lesson in this truth. It was Ananda who had captured him and brought him back from his flight to the Himalayas, described by Yogananda in Autobiography of a Yogi. In Yogananda's book, we read how Ananda later challenged him in the city of Agra to pit his divine faith against such practical worldly considerations as the need for earning a living. Fearless before that challenge, the young aspirant agreed to go by train without any money to the nearby town of Brindaban, not to miss a single meal in Brindaban, and to find his way back to Agra without begging and without in any other way asking for help. In one of the most thrilling chapters in the book, Yogananda fulfilled all the conditions of the test. Yogananda continued the account. As the tale was unfolded, my brother turned sober, then solemn. The law of demand and supply reaches into subtler realms than I had supposed. Ananda spoke with a spiritual enthusiasm never before noticeable. I understand for the first time your indifference to the false and vulgar accumulations of the world. Late as it was, my brother insisted that he receive Diksha, initiation into Kriya Yoga. As the Bhagavad Gita puts it in the 9th chapter, those who worship lesser gods go to their gods, but those who worship me come to me. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning. Thank you. I'd like to read from Whispers from Eternity, mystical poems by Paramahansa Yogananda. I tune my life with thine. Now my life has become a long unbroken inspiration. Thy fountain of bliss refreshes and delights me night and day, whether I am wakeful, fast asleep, or dreaming fondly of thee. Oh, what has become of me? Delight on overwhelming delight, endless, indescribable thrills of divine delight spray unceasingly over me. O age nectar, wine of centuries, I found thee at last, and will taste of thy sweetness forever, forever, forever. Thank you. Seek ye first, and all these things shall be added unto you, Swami said, is one of the greatest saints of Christ. And the Ananda community, we wouldn't have existed or flourished without living by that principle. In 1967, I think it was, we had a visiting sociologist, and they were observing the community. A lot of communities were being formed around that time. And he said, you guys are a great success. You've been in existence for 2 months. And he said the average lifespan of communities is 2 weeks. So I'm not sure how many years we have now, but quite a few. And we know how much the community has flourished as a community, but also in the hearts of all of us who live here, but the many people who visit and tune in over the internet. Yogananda said that love is the highest, most sublime principle in the universe. It harmonizes and unites. And Swami, he lived by many principles, but two of them is that where there's truth, where there's God, there's victory. And also the importance of kindness, because through kindness people become open to higher truths. They don't resist. And many of us who knew Swami Kriyananda, it was easy to go forward on the spiritual path because of that example. You felt that he had and knew your highest interest. And you were inspired to go farther than perhaps you thought you could ever go before. Yogananda said that man, he works from the outside in, and God works from the inside out. And if you can, we all have learned meditation, and we know about concentrating at the higher centers, and if you can just imagine the star of spirit and beyond vibratory creation, and the blue field, the causal world, the realm of Om, if you could just feel God's love, just manifesting, sustaining all creation, and just flowing out from spirit, and then going into the astral world, and then to the material world, and then forming matter. Babaji said that the divine realms go all the way to matter, but matter being illusory doesn't retain the essence of reality. And so it's really our choice, isn't it? If we contact God and just attune ourselves to God, then everything we see, everything we do, will feel godly. But if we're at the periphery of our awareness, then we will be matter-bound in the realm of reality and all the things that go with that. I'd like to... Yogananda said that everybody's experience of life is different. And of course, we know that. We've met a lot of, as Jaya would say, interesting characters along the way. But this is what Yogananda talked about. When we're in the realm of duality, in this case, Yogananda was calling it nature. He said, God is expressed in nature is unknown, mysterious, elusive, and indifferent to the affairs of man. Then God is revealed to the devotee is intimate, sociable, indescribably lovable, and consciously and directly interested in removing all miseries of man. Now, which one would you choose? And so this is really... This is really the promise and the inner experience of every devotee, an experience that grows deeper and deeper. I often thought about the incredible renunciation of saints, and you kind of sometimes, it gives you pause. I remember we went to a pilgrimage in the early, when we first started coming from the United States to Assisi, and it was I think late November, and we were meditating in the little caves near one of the hermitages by St. Francis, and it was really cold, and I had my thick wool pants on and a down coat, and I was still cold, and I was just thinking about St. Francis, and he just said, you should be so on fire for God that you just don't feel anything in this world. And I don't know about you. There's times when we can have mental distance and not buy into things around, but to fully transcend, that's a lot. And I know that we've had experiences of that, many of us, and a growing understanding of its truth. But this is what's really available for us. Another thing, Kriya Yoga, we had a lot of new initiates last night. And with Kriya, we're trying to bring the life force and center it in the deep spine. And that energy, as it goes deep enough, flows unidirectionally up to the spiritual eye. And it's really a consolidation of the life force. Life force is really a more subtle aspect of God. And when we concentrate it and offer it up, we have more of God. And Swami Kriyananda in a class said that when we are centered in the spine, outer events, outer realities adjust to our own inner control and reflect that. And why is that? Because scattered energy is less magnetic than consolidated energy of that life force being concentrated in the spine. And he's often used the phrase, you can change your destiny through the practice of Kriya Yoga. Really all yoga reverses the energy back into the spine. And we can just change everything around us, first by not reacting and buying into it, of course. But I know Jyotishan, Nayaswami Jyotish, the spiritual director of Ananda, in a class in India, I think it was the last visit he was in India, he talked about where he's noticed that when you think of Jyotish, you think of calmness and just being centered in God. And he said he's just noticed that he'll go into a room where there's people that have emotions, and he'll just calm down in his presence. And that's because of his withdrawn energy in the spine, where he's just with God there. And the outer life just responds and reflects that. And so, especially in these times, they're very interesting times, and how do we really calm duality? Well, that's getting in the center of duality, isn't it? At the very center, where there's no opposite or opposition. And that's really the path, the option of a devotee, the gift of anyone who practices inward teachings, and the contribution that we can make in this world today. I had an experience of, well, first I want to say Master was very fond of the saying in the Bible and that God will give us the power and become the sons and daughters of God. And he'll give us the strength. All we have to do is have the desire. I had just moved to Ananda in early, mid-70s. And for a time, there weren't too many jobs. I worked at a scout camp for 2 summers up in the Donner Summit area, the High Sierras. And we had it was pretty isolated where we were, and there was one Saturday night where they took all the staff, the adults, and had a dinner in Truckee on a Saturday night. And I was a new monk in the monastery, and so we had our dinner, and then I was walking along the restaurants, and there were a lot of bars on downtown Truckee. And it's a town not too far from Ananda, for those that don't know the local geography. And I remembered how Swamiji was walking in San Francisco, and he had to pass through an area before he got to another nicer area where he was meeting somebody. And he was just inwardly chanting of God, and he just felt so joyful. And so that reminded me of what was possible. And so I was walking along, and there was all kinds of chaos and loud, happy outward times, and that just the whole scene. And I was just feeling more and more joy of God in my heart. And I wanted to kind of get away from that area, and I started walking and through a dark neighborhood, and it was quiet, and I enjoyed it. And all of a sudden, I came to a church. And I thought, well, maybe it's open. I can sit down and pray. So I walked into the church, and in the sanctuary, there were 10 people sitting there. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to pray here. Maybe there's somewhere else. But they came and asked me, can we help you? And I said, well, I've come to pray. And so they took me into the private quarters of the head minister, his office, and I had a wonderful hour-long meditation. And then I had to get back to meet the truck that was taking us up the hill. And they said, well, have you eaten? Do you have a place to stay? And they were just very open-hearted. And I said, no, I have to go back up in the hills. And then I walked. But I was just so touched. It was such a simple thing. It wasn't dramatic. But when we're in tune, God is, I won't say in tune with us. He's always in tune with us. But he really magnifies that and really makes it easy for us to follow, because that's all he wants, is that he wants our love. His love is always there, but he can't extend that fully to us unless we are offering our love, because we would take it in the wrong way. And so he has to wait. And how long has he waited? Well, the teachings say that for many souls, he's waited 5 million lifetimes. It's a long time. But when a soul starts to practice an inner teaching and is really living their life thinking of God, it's just a matter of time. It could be a few lifetimes. It could be this lifetime. That's what Swami has promised us. That's what Master Paramahansa Yogananda has promised. It's just a matter of more and better, as Sister Gautamata said. Yogananda said that when we're in the present moment, we have God. And what does that mean exactly, the present moment? Well, that means that we aren't in our likes and dislikes. We aren't in our preferences. And of course, the whole definition of yoga is neutralizing the likes and dislikes. And so we aren't inhabiting our ego. We're free, at least to a certain degree. I had an experience I've told many of you, and I just want to sort of talk about just the very end of it. Also happened up in the High Sierras near Donner Pass. But I had took the wrong side of a path down from a ridge, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to get to my car, and I might have to sleep out in the snow at night, and I didn't have the clothing for it. And I was coming down into a large lake, and I was just praying to God, just was giving it to God, and I just started feeling closer and closer to God as I went. I didn't know what was going to happen. I knew it wasn't going to be that drastic, but it might be, as John Muir said, that when it got cold, he had to jump around all night to stay warm. Thought maybe something like that could happen, but but that would be the worst of things. And as I got to the lake, I didn't know where I was, and there was a boat out, maybe 40 yards from shore, but I was feeling so much peace in my heart that I didn't want to disturb that peace, that God's joy that I was feeling was much, much more important than what happened outwardly. It just didn't matter. And I just kept walking. It took me a while to walk to this cove, and there was a fisherman on this side of the cove, just maybe 40 feet away, not 40 yards. And I could speak in a normal voice, and I asked him what lake it was, and he told me. And by this time it was dark, and my car was 12 miles away, and I didn't have a flashlight. And he just told me the name of the lake, and I didn't say anything. And I was walking, I was walking with my feet like this, shuffling, because I couldn't see. And then out of the darkness, the young man said, why didn't you know the lake where you're at? And then I explained that where I'd left my car, and I was going back to get my car. And he said, well, we'll take you. And so we got in the car, and I was in the back seat with him, and there were two in the front. And they didn't want to drive up that 8-mile road filled with rocks and potholes. It's actually a car-destroying road, and I didn't blame them. And so they were saying, no, we can't do that. And actually, I was hoping that would be the case. Because the joy I felt in my heart with God it's not my normal everyday experience to that degree that's sustained for that level. I wanted the night to last longer, and maybe it would last till the next day. And but they decided to take me to my car, and I did. I got in the car and I drove home. But it just gave me an experience of that when we don't, we have to use our will. We're trying to serve God and help others through our service. And so, of course, we apply ourselves. We go from no will to my will, but then eventually we turn into God's will. And when we tune into God's will, we have the backing of the whole universe behind us. And God will reach out and He'll touch our heart. There's an amazing story of a man in the early years at Ananda named Ram Leela. Many of us remember him. He was very short, but he was very, very wide. And he was a weightlifter, and he wanted to try out for the Olympics. He was an interesting fellow. He had been a member of the Hells Angels before he had come to Ananda. He was at the village, and one of the Hells Angel members came to check on him because they normally don't allow people to leave the organization. They know too much. But they saw the life that he was leading here, and they went back. Well, Ram Leela was just very physical, but he had a great heart. And he went to see Ananda Ma in India. He went on a pilgrimage to India, which many people in the community will be going on. And he was sitting with Ma, and his whole life was changed. He just felt this incredible love. The people around Ananda Ma said, Ma tamed the tiger, the wild tiger. And I remember I had come to Ananda, and he was there in the common dome, and he was this guy that looked different than anybody else that was there, just bulging muscles, and but all he could talk about was Divine Mother's love, Divine Mother's love. Oh, Divine Mother's love. It's the only thing worth living for. That's all that he could talk about. And I wanted to finish the thought that I started but didn't finish a little while ago. The idea of feeling the incredible renunciation of the great saints. How do they want to renounce everything and put everything aside? It's because of feeling that love of God and the tremendous joy, and everything else pales and insignificant. It just doesn't seem real. And after a while, we learn that it isn't real, and it doesn't define who we are. And then it's easy to make choices at that point. And the right choices, I think Parvati was talking about last service. We see through physical reality. Sometimes we think that we need the right situation to flourish and to grow spiritually. In the early years, it seems like we have a lot of experiences in our early years on the path that are very instructive. But there was a fire at Ananda in 1976, as we all know. And many of us, Parvati, Haridas, Santosh, Benai, and Paul Staley, and some others, Kirtani, we all went to the rice fields to earn money for the community, because the community, a big part of it was just ashes. And so we went, and we were just getting started, and I grew up in the rice fields, and so I knew the area a little bit. And so I was there, and I was hired first. I was running the rice dryer and running it to the different bends. And it was early in the season, so the rest of the crew went back, and Swami gave Sunday service, and I was feeling like, oh gee, I miss Swami's service. And my first day on the job, I worked 18 hours, and we're just getting started, and I remember I was just learning where everything went, and I started everything going to the outspout rather than to another bend, and I turned it off quickly and ran out to look, see what happened, and the boss was there, standing there, and the richest rice grower in the valley was standing there under the spout, and all this dust came down and just fell all over them. And luckily they just laughed, and because they knew that I was new. And then our team came back, but then I heard through the grapevine that Swami was meditating and energizing for the monks' evening meditation. And I thought, oh, because I was new and Swami hadn't done that before, and he was doing it for a good time. I think he was trying to create a sense of group discipline for the monks. And I was a little bit sort of, oh gosh, I'm missing out. And then I thought about my life. We didn't have too long to meditate. Our hours were just 12 hours. Had gone down from the long hours. And but there wasn't much time to meditate. And I had about an 8-minute walk to the rice dryer where we stayed. And I realized that I was floating on air. And, maybe I was meditating 20 minutes, maybe it was 40 minutes, I don't know how long. We just woke up and just started sitting and meditating, and then rushed, got breakfast, and went to our jobs. But I realized that I was just feeling this incredible joy, and I realized I'm included in this energy that Swami's putting out with the monks, and we don't need at least our idea of what the ideal situation is, do we? We just need to offer ourselves to God, and everything will be taken care of. Everyone here at Ananda has been in a place where you had to sacrifice in a tremendous way, and to give yourself. And God is watching, that example, that intention of ours, more than if we're just sitting kind of cruising along with the good energy of some kind of event. But that's where we really are self-offering to God when things are challenging, and when we're really giving. The more that we can give, the more God can give back to us, can't He? Somebody had used the expression of that in a puzzle, we buy a puzzle that has a picture on it. We have more faith in that piece of puzzle, because we know it's going to form a picture, than we have faith in maybe a life experience that we're going through. How could God permit this, or what is He doing? But we know that God has our highest interests at heart. And there's a beautiful example of someone named Brother Andrew, and many of us may have read his book. And he was someone who, he was actually a commando in World War II and got injured and wanted to become a missionary. And as soon as he said he gave away his ego, he had actually had a permanent limp because he got shot in the ankle. God instantly healed him. And then he went through missionary school, and he was taking Bibles into Eastern European countries. And he got in the line. There were only 4 cars in front of him, and he thought, oh, well, this shouldn't take too long. Well, the first car, they had the driver get out, and they took 45 minutes going through the car, taking the hubcaps off and everything. And he started to get a little nervous. And then the next car, same thing. I think 3 cars were ahead of him. Actually, he was the 4th car. And so he had, I should say, he had probably 400 Bibles in his car at the time. And people, a lot of the Christian congregations didn't have a Bible. They hadn't actually seen a Bible. They'd heard about the Bible and heard through other people. So he was bringing Bibles to the country. So he knew that there was no way he could pass inspection. So he took several of the Bibles out, unwrapped them, and just laid them out on the front seat. And then he pulled up, and the guard was standing right there, big guy, and he asked to see his ID, and his picture matched his passport, and then he was getting ready to get out of the car because he had asked everybody else to, but the guard had his knees against the door, and he couldn't get out, and so and then the guard said like this, and so he thought, well, maybe he's waving me to just go 20 feet and then pull over, so he drove 20 feet, and no one was looking at him, no one came over, and so he drove a little bit more, and looked around, no one, and he saw the guard waving to the other guy to come up. And so he said, well, let's get out of here. And he drove off. And he said, there are many dramatic stories to his life, but he said, what's so beautiful about relying completely on God and being obedient completely to his will is to find out later what he had in mind through the whole experience. And he lived so closely with God that it was just, he said, never once, ever, did I ever see God not come through for my life. And, Master said there's a law that was passed in the heavenly abodes that says that when the devotee relies completely on God, God will take care of that devotee's situation. And just to explain that a little bit, I mean, it's just hearing that and from our experience of that happening in our lives and friends of our other friends. But if you think of spirit, the stillness, and then God's thought is vibrating, and that's Om, that permeates all creation, and that's the presence of God. But if you think instead of Om, because maybe we don't hear Om in meditation, but if you think of it as the Holy Spirit, which is all the vibrations, all the qualities of God, that's just permeating all existence. And that anytime we try to live by truth, through joy, through calmness, stillness, sense of love, we're attuning ourselves to that divine quality, and we're just in the presence of God, and nothing can touch us when we're in that experience, or if it does, it's in the rightness of things, and we will find out that it's a greater blessing afterwards. I want to tell another story. I know I've gone a little over, but it's a good story. There was a king who was a very kindly king, and he loved his subjects and thought of their highest interest all the time, and the people loved him. But it was time for him to go out into the forest and renounce all his riches, his wealth. And so he made an announcement that he was going to be sharing something with everyone in the kingdom. Well, he'd always been a very generous king, and so there was great excitement in the people of the realm, and they were intrigued and excited, and many people lined up very, very early. Sort of like, Black Friday. And they lined up at the temple, and then they came in, and he said that it's time for me to go out in the forest. I'm giving everything away in the palace. Well, the people were just so excited. They just jumped up, and they were clapping each other on the back, and then they realized some had taken off already for the crown jewels and others for the paintings, and they just went out throughout the whole palace, and they were grabbing things and stuffing them in, and sometimes they were squabbling over precious objects. And finally, they just ran out with all the goods back to their home. And the palace now was deserted, except for the king and this young girl named Elizabeth, who was 8 years old. And she was still there. And the king looked at her and smiled kindly at her. And he said, what do you want? And she smiled, and she had been sitting there, and she was always in the habit of sitting next to the king at any event. And so, she, as I said, she stood, and she reached out with her hands, and she grabbed the king's hands and brought it to her. And she said, I want you. And he smiled, and his smile was as bright as 1,000 suns. And from his heart, it radiated out this tremendous joy and blessing. And, you know, an interesting thing happened after that, because the people who had taken precious objects from the kingdom, their objects were broken, or some were stolen, or some people just got tired of the objects. And people, after a few years, were just the way they were as before. But Elizabeth, she kept the joy of the king in her heart. And it stayed in her heart and grew in her heart. And more and more. And she kept really the true wealth of the king. And it's the same way with all of us. We've come from Spirit, and we're infused by Spirit. Our soul is the infinite Spirit. That's our destiny, to reawaken to that. And we all come down into creation, and sometimes we get a little confused in terms of what is real and what isn't real. But at a certain point, we have a strong suspicion and then a growing experience that we know that God is real. God is what's going to bring us the highest fulfillment in our lives. And that's when we're like the child Elizabeth, where we say to God, no matter what happens, whatever you offer to me, I want you. And so, in seeking God leads to experiencing God. And we really reclaim our true destiny. God is beyond creation. He doesn't want us to be touched by anything in his creation. He wants us to be like him. And so this is what the soul journey is all about. And so by keeping that clarity, that focus on God, will quicken the day